Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki, and welcome to the 381st Imagine Buffalo program and the third virtual Imagine lecture hosted by the Downtown Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Thank you so much for joining us today. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art and Architecture, History and Nature, Cezanne as I pronounce it, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Cezanne's mission is to explore life's ancient aesthetic values, beauty, truth, goodness, and justice as part of the Buffalo Chautauqua idea. Its website can be found at buffaloah.com. We're going to start with our speaker shortly, but first, a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted during our speaker's presentation, which will last about 15 minutes. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. This program is being recorded. You'll be able to watch it again later or share it on the library's Facebook and the library's YouTube channel pages. Please tell your friends and networks of this new library service. As a reminder, we'll be here on Zoom every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. with a great lineup of local speakers. Today's featured speaker is Don Boswell. Donald K. Boswell, President and CEO of Buffalo Toronto Public Media, is a public broadcasting veteran of 53 years, having held positions with North Texas Public Broadcasting, Inc. in Dallas, KCTS in Seattle, and WVIA TV FM in Pittston, Pennsylvania, prior to joining Buffalo Toronto Public Media in January of 1998. The Pittsburgh native is the recipient of numerous PBS Professional Awards and 5 National Program Emmy Awards. 5 National Program Emmy Awards. He has a long history of community service on boards, including his current service on John R. O'Shea Foundation, AAA, the National AAA, Independent Health, 5 Star Bank, New Era Cap Company, International Advisory Board of the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, and the board of the Red Sky Theatre in Canada. Don has held several leadership roles within public broadcasting organizations, including vice chair of the PBS board and chair of American Public Television, APT. He has also served on the PBS Foundation Board and Foundation Endowment Fund Committee. After his presentation, we have our annual award to present, but now let's give a welcome to Don Boswell.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And I have to tell you, I remember 2010 when we got together when you first started about imagining Buffalo, what it would look like in 20 years. And so I'll have to pull out that script and kind of see what I projected and see if I'm on tune to that. But I want to thank you and the organization for having me today. And I kind of like your theming that you've done when you talk about Imagine Greater Buffalo, but also imagine lifelong learning. And I think what I'm going to try to do is go through sort of what's taking place and the challenges and yet opportunities in public broadcasting. But this outline, I really believe it can be used for any business, any nonprofit, or organization that's looking at sort of the challenges we're facing under the pandemic and the sort of things we need to be thinking about in the future as we run our day-to-day lives in our businesses and our organizations. So with that, I think the real theme that I'm using is the whole idea of meeting the challenge of change. And as you can see with our next slide, when we were basically getting started years ago thinking about HD television and radio, at that time we just had WNED and WNED AM and WNED FM classical. And yet through the technology that's taken place, as you can see in your screen, we have now 3 TV stations and 3 radio stations. But that just didn't occur overnight. There were times where we've really had to think about how we were going to utilize these channels, what were the content opportunities that we felt the public would be most interested in, and what were the sort of opportunities for its future to maintain these channels in relationship to content and acquisition of content. But I'm very happy that we've got a great team here. We consistently talk about, change and challenges and kind of understanding what this means for our own future. And again, as we go through this presentation, I'm going to cut it so we can keep it within 15 minutes. But if you are interested in kind of getting copies of my presentation, we'll make sure if you reach out to the station that we will get this whole presentation to you as well. So under mastering change, I'm just really look at two of the elements here. And the first one is, build commitment through goals and passion. And I think that's where really the staff and the board of our organization have really talked about what commitment needs to be made in relationship to sort of passion of our mission related to public broadcasting and how we go about making sure we can acquire the sort of content around our organization for our public that is full of the passion of the things that people want to watch or listen to in the organization. So we spend a lot of time on goals. And then, of course, you have to have the passion for those goals to actually make them happen. Now, you'll see at the bottom, I say communicate effectively. And I think that's something that all of us go through is how do we make sure the entire organization is following that sort of idea of communications in a way that everybody's engaged and involved in. One of the things that we're facing now is, as proud as I am of WBFO, it's been the last 7 years, the best radio station in the state of New York. And this award's given by Associated Press. And for the last 7 years being the best radio station, but we're finding out that there are things that maybe we could communicate more, efficiently and better within the radio station. And so management and our staff are looking at ways which, as much as we appreciate all these great awards, but we still have to operate in a way that is meeting the challenges that the staff has and meeting the needs that the management team has. And sometimes you can get out of the loop when you don't really communicate effectively. So I would say under mastering change, the big element there is the ability to communicate effectively. So then, as we look at the next slide, what does a learning organization look like? There are 2 bullet points here I want to focus on. The one is invest in staying ahead of the learning curve in its industry. And all of us, I guess, have competition in some form. Ours is probably more, I guess, competitive with all the streaming and digital services, the competition with cable and commercial television, and on and on and on. And so it is something that, we have to learn to think sort of creative and have that passion and think about where are the opportunities for our future. Because some people say, well, with all these new, sort of ways which people receive content, is there really a need for public broadcasting? And my answer has been that it's been amazing to see that we're one of the 5th most watched stations network-wise, which does say there's a relevant point of things that we do and that we have. That's important. But it's also trying to make sure we stay ahead of that curve and provide the services not only on the air, but off the air in the community as well. And the other one, it's at the bottom again, supports people and teams who want to pursue action learning projects. And that's one of the things that we really try to work with here at the station is how do we get everybody engaged and thinking about where are the new sort of opportunities in learning, especially knowing that our mission is somewhat set up in education, that we do entertainment, as we all know, a variety of different news services that we provide. But how do we support the organization and the people within that organization to really create action learning sort of projects? And that's where that whole idea of the learning organization comes into place, because everybody that works here, we feel, has some creativity or they can imagine something that's taking place in their home or in their neighborhood or organizations they belong to. And how do we kind of bring that creative mind for the new content that we need to develop? So then the next slide, how does a learning organization evolve? And again, there's 2 points here we'll go over: tying the goal of becoming a learning organization to its vision, And, that's easier said than done. All of us have mission statements, but I challenge all of you to think about having a real vision statement and understanding what that vision is for the next 2, 5, 10 years, and really setting goals and sort of ideas to create that sort of vision for the organization that matches, of course, your missions, but the whole idea of becoming more of a learning organization towards a vision and towards a goal that you're setting beyond just your mission statement. And then at the bottom again, finding ways to collaborate internally and unhampered by boundaries. And, one of the things I think we try to do is really keep communications openly within the organization. So there are various ways which the organization is really trying to collaborate on projects and ideas, keeping in mind we can't do everything for everyone, but realizing what are the most important things that we need to collaborate internally first with, and then how do we then start evolving the organization to work with other organizations outside of what we do in relationship to our mission of being a public broadcasting institution. So on the next slide, you can see these are a number of our, sort of national programs that have been, of course, on public broadcasting. And you can see that we're looking to bring back Reading Rainbow shortly. That'll be a national treasure. Many of you know we've done the War of 1812. We've done the Klondike Gold Rush, the Marines, Underground Railroad, the Warrior Tradition. These are all sort of not only, the idea of creating content, but the idea of imagination where, utilizing, the creative forces within our community, the creative forces within the organization. Many of you know, and Dennis and I were talking about this, when you walk into our building, there are 2 big banners we have in our lobby. One says imagination, and another one says collaboration. And our belief is one can't happen without the other. As much as we love the idea of using our imagination, it couldn't occur without collaboration within the community. So we have a lot of creative, collaborative partners, and we try to always look to how we can make ideas that come into the organization reality. Again, can't do everything, but what are the most important things in working with our collaborative partners, realizing they have an imagination with their businesses and their organizations, and how can we turn that into forms of content? So the next slide gets into what does a learning organization learn? And I like to go down to link individual performances with organizational performances. And this is key because, the idea of an individual having, creative ideas and, being out in front of it, and that's all well and good. But unless the organization can really perform around those ideas, and no one person can get anything done without truly an organizational sort of performance around it. The example I like to use is I love Ken Burns. I think we all watch and listen to everything that Ken does with the national presence he has with a number of great performances. And sometimes we think it's all Ken. But Ken will tell you he has a tremendous organizational performance structure around him. He may be some of the creative ideas, but he also has a lot of creative partners in performing these national productions that surround him. He uses a lot of insights from other organizations to help fill out the content and sort of the structure of his programs and the things that he does. And I think that's key to realize that not one person can do it alone, that as an organizational sort of objective to learn, that we have to do it as a performance-based on an organizational sort of structure. And the last one is to make it safe for people to share openly and take risks. I always tell our staff, we should always look to take risks, not to burn down the organization or to lose funding or to lose money, but how can we take risks that we can calculate and know that it does have a fairly successful opportunity of being successful, and how do we all share in those risks together to make sure that we're all learning about that opportunity and realizing if there are risks, how do we make sure that over time and really working to achieve that goal, that we take the risk away which makes it more enjoyable that the idea will be accomplished and the content will take place. So the next slide really gets into, some of the graphic sorts of things I look at as far as, the fact, okay, we are a nonprofit organization, but we really are a business first. And all of us know that when you have a business, that you have to make sure that, first of all, that you really are looking at the sort of technology in your business, because that's the one thing that all of us can, I think, understand, that technology is so up in front and beyond, where we are today and what it may be in just 6 months from now. So how do we use these new sorts of architectural sort of technology placements in ways in which we can use them to help us with the business philosophy that we've created? And then how do we use that creative element, where you can see a creative environment next to it? Because creative environments, there's a cost to that, there's pressures, and most of all, it's time. And so sometimes if you're really working on a creative idea, it can take a really long time, and then you have to question, is it worth the time, cost, and the pressure to get there? And that's where I think, next to that, where you see knowledge economy, how do we leverage then the organization's community-wide knowledge? And again, trying to make sure that we're partnering and collaborating and using the resources in the community, because a lot of things beyond what happens in our building are being done in the community. And so how do we use that knowledge economy that's in the community to help us create programs? And that's why you see WNAD and WBFO at the bottom, because in understanding that knowledge economy, there is a requirement for, I would call it, skills transfer. And that to me is really the training that takes place inside the organization to meet all of the above, to meet the sort of creative elements, the business elements, technology elements, and using the community to actually help us in kind of developing the long-term sort of way in which we want to be competitive. And so that's where the next slide really comes into place, where we talk about competitive advantages. And with this slide, you'll see that where we say competition, I like to think that we're, competing against the other elements of the commercial world, the cable world, YouTube, and a lot of great ideas. The competition side deal with speed. How quickly can we get these ideas to the public? How quickly can we make it something we own with the content and the things that we do? And then these are all the things that I think kind of go around being a competitor. Program development, the cost of that. I wish you could say that everything is free. I think we all know that there is a lot that goes into the technical side, the equipment side, the entertainment side. There are a lot of things that come together that, really in the way of developing content and on programs, that there's a cost factor that takes place there. Then I would say, as we've talked about speed, then there's that delivery sort of opportunity. Some things are better on radio than they are on TV. Some things are better on YouTube, maybe as ideas, than it is on television. So how do we use the technology and a lot of these great ideas and things that we are seeing as further enhancements to people's sort of member satisfaction, but also is at the level of quality that we feel is needed? Because no use, doing a lot of content if there's no really quality sort of connection to member satisfaction. And of course, I mentioned member satisfaction because in a lot of ways, I think a lot of us know that the greatest resource for public broadcasting is our member base. And even though we receive federal and state funding, that only really represents about 22–24% of our budget. So that other, sort of difference of 72 or 73% really comes from the public, either through member support, corporations, or foundations. And I think the way and the reason why they're supporting us is the real quality of the differences that we can make in relationship to that. So if you go to the next slide, this is the days, from me watching the movie The Matrix. I like to call this my Matrix slide. Because all the things we talked about, knowledge management, processing, structure, technology, facilities, people, leadership, you know, there's only, again, so much time that you have to make these things come together, to really have what I would call the change integration opportunities in our ability to provide the sort of services and the things that we do. But you can see over, you know, as you look at that word time, that time starts shrinking till it gets to a point where it's done. It's either you did it or you haven't done it. And what we try to do is, with the time factors related to all these change sort of integration factors of technology and processing and facilities, is really, you know, be very careful about time management on things so that within that time period that we can accomplish these goals and these opportunities. In these next few slides, I just pull these things out only because I think that's what, you know, sort of pushes this organization. Peter Senge, you know, has this great quote: learning organizations are those where people continually expand their capacity, create the results they truly desire, where new and expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured, where collective aspirations are set free, and where people are continually learning how to learn together. And that's why I love your theme, I guess, Dennis, the idea of imagined lifelong learning. It's so important in the ability to have that. This next slide really gets to the, Ann Plato wrote that education is that which prepares us for the future. And we should never stop learning. We should never start using or stop using the sort of ways that technology has made present to us, these abilities to find content and to learn from the various platforms of digital and television and radio and the various platforms that we use that are available to us, so that we can always continue to prepare for our future. And then this next slide really, you know, as I said before, even though we're a nonprofit, we're a business, and we can't be thinking that business as usual is really unusual. If we think today, the business that we're doing today is going to be the business of tomorrow, that is quite unusual, especially the world of technology, especially during the times right now with COVID and the pandemic. I think we're all thinking differently. And the business that we used to do years ago, quite frankly, is much different now and will be much different in the future. And then this next one slide is my last one. And John Vanier had this one where he says, to work for the community is to work for humanity. And I like to believe that's the work that we try to foster here at this organization, is the real efforts that we have from newborns up to, you know, people who are 110 years old. What do we provide not only on the air, but for our community as well? So Dennis and Melissa, I'll stop here and I'll be glad to take any questions. I hope I kept that within the 15 minutes that I promised.
Sure did. Melissa, do we have any questions in the chat box?
Yeah, Dennis, I have two questions. The first is, what role does public radio play in reporting in an unbiased way issues such as taking the census, wearing a mask, and registering to vote in the election?
Well, I think, again, we all understand the importance right now of, you know, the idea of wearing masks. And I think our reporters are consistently telling that story in different forms, from a political standpoint, you know, from a health standpoint, from just the everyday sort of situations that are affecting our community. You know, we have a low percentage now of COVID sort of illness in the community, and yet it changes, you know, every day in some ways. And I think the outreach of our news staff in the community and being able to tell those stories from people who recovered from COVID and, you know, telling their stories, but also, you know, trying to understand, you know, what are the sort of, you know, stories that we need to be telling to maintain a healthy and safe community, and, you know, who are the real leaders in this community that we need to be interviewing and telling their stories. And I think that's the big makeup of our news division, is being able to be in the community. And I should say we have more news staff than any commercial radio station in our community. And I think that has shown to make a big difference in being able to cover a variety of different things that we think are important for our community.
And then we had one more question. Are there any plans for WBFO radio to run music programming again, like jazz? The weekend nighttime bluegrass shows are good, but what about jazz programming? The on-air programming schedule just changed, and some of the talk programs run twice a day, such as Fresh Air. Is there any chance that music could be featured again? There is no jazz radio in Western New York, which means we listen to a Canadian station.
Ah, that's a great question, and you must not be aware of JazzWorks. I did not plant that question, I promise, Dennis and Melissa. But we have on WBFO, our secondary HD channel is JazzWorks. And if you basically, go to get the app, you can have jazz 24 hours a day. And we're very proud of that. We try to promote that, on our TV and our radio stations. But if you're not aware of that or having a problem finding it, just call the station. We'll direct you to that. But JazzWorks is a 24-hour jazz opportunity. And the person is right. When we acquired BFO, they did have a jazz element with it and a bluegrass element on it as well. We haven't quite been able to get to the bluegrass side of it opportunity, but at least in the jazz side of it, we do have that 24-hour jazz app. And I think you would love, once you get connected to that, fulfilling your jazz needs. We'll still have to work with you on the bluegrass side of it as well.
And then I have one comment from someone. Bob says, Don, the PBS employees have gotten it with regard to collaboration with the community. Appreciate your support in the community partnership. An example is Peter Hall's work within the community from classical music education, theater reviews, and bicycle riding, physical fitness areas. Again, appreciate your role as CEO and supporter of your employees' community participation.
Well, thank you for that. And, in mentioning Peter Hall, Peter is supposed to be retired, but you would never know that. I think we keep him as busy as when he was working full time. But, we do try to, find ways that our employees are engaged in the community beyond just what they do on our airways, because I think, as many of you know, the support comes to the community to allow us to meet our mission. And we think it's part of giving back. And I think all of our employees are some way engaged in activities on boards, being engaged in things in relationship to a number of things in their communities that they can show in giving back. So it is appreciative that we do hear people who do note the things that our staff are doing in the community as well.
Don, I wonder if you could comment. You recently had a name change, Buffalo Toronto Public Media. And I know in your fundraising efforts, you often emphasize the valued folks up in Canada that are part of your neighborhood, if you will. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, could you elaborate? Is that a growing market, that very gigantic 5 or 6 million people in Southern Ontario compared to the much smaller market here in Buffalo? Has that been growing in your experience?
Yeah, I think Toronto's been just an amazing market as far as its growth over the last really 10 to 15 years. And it really helps Buffalo because, not to knock Buffalo, but about 62% of our member base are Canadians. Mm-hmm. But you got to keep in mind, Toronto is 10 times the size of Buffalo, our reach there. So it should be, bigger member base. And we do have offices and studios that we own. We don't lease them or rent them. And as you can see by the content that we offer in our air, we appeal to them, but also that appeal to that market's also an appeal for our U.S. audience, where sometimes the numbers are outstanding in relationship to what would maybe termed as Canadian content, but really is universal content. And so we're seeing ongoing opportunities in program collaborations. The War of 1812 is a perfect example of collaboration on the Canadian side to do that production. The Klondike Gold Rush was another one. I mean, I can go on, and yet the same idea of, how does a learning organization evolve? We just think there are tremendous things that come out of Toronto that sometimes don't get on American television. Last night we had this great thing with the Monk Foundation that has been a nice partnership with them in relationship to kind of debating, national and international topics. And again, that's not on American television. And thanks to our efforts, it's now in our air and we're syndicating that. But there's just, a tremendous way to build not only the marketplace there, but it also, when you add that marketplace to the Buffalo marketplace, it makes us like the 6th or 7th biggest TV market. And we can leverage that when we were doing local programs ourselves, and someone wants us to air something in our market, knowing they're the 7th biggest market. And we say, well, we have a local program we want you to air, and we'll be glad to hear yours. So that helps us, again, to tell the Western New York story as well as the Southern Ontario story on a national basis.
Mhm.
Dennis, why don't we move along to the award portion, since it is after 1 o'clock now.
And that's just where we were going here. Today, Don Boswell will also receive 2020 Cezanne Imagine Greater Buffalo Recognition Award. This award is presented to people who exemplify Cezanne's mission and work to connect and unify our community, often behind the scenes. Previous recipients of the Imagine Greater Buffalo Recognition Award all came to the library to receive their award. So Don, you are the first virtual recipient. We're going to make a way to get you the physical award. Previous awardees have been, and I'll just mention very quickly their names. Last year, Elizabeth Licata, editor of Western New York Spree; Michelle Cavanaugh, Western New York STEM founder; Bob Cressy, Sally Cunningham, Congressman Brian Higgins, Marty Gorman, Joan Bozer, Ann Conable, Jerry Rising, Ed Healy, John Conlon, Stan Lipsy, Charles Rand Penny came just a few months before he passed away, and Bob Shibley and Chuck Lacusa rounded out. So let's see if we have an image of the recognition award that we can show. Melissa, do you have that?
I'm not sure which award, which image you were.
Before there was some sort of packet award that you were presenting that had been created by Erie County.
Oh, of the proclamation. I see. Yes. Okay. Yes. Sorry. Hold on 1 second.
This is the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library, and this award this year for the first time is jointly being presented to Don Boswell from the Imagine series and the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Joy or anyone else, do you have anything else to comment on this certificate? Can you make it out? By Mark Polenkar's honoring Donald K. Boswell. We're going to physically get this to you one way or the other.
Well, thank you so much. That's very, very nice. And I'm in good company with the names you've mentioned in past winners. And I also would like to dedicate this to my staff. I mean, they're the ones that make me look good, and they're really the ones doing all the great work that takes place behind this award. So thank you so much for that recognition. And again, I'd like to just thank our staff and our board for all that they do in allowing us to do the jobs that we do here at the stations.
All right, Dan, I'm going to also, let's see if I can get a shot. I've always given the awardees a silver peace dollar. 1923 uncirculated silver peace dollar. Bob Shibley, the first early on recipient, always commented that was, you knew it was worth at least $1 in the open market, but I hope it's worth a lot more emotionally as well as otherwise. But it's a way of symbolizing those peace dollars after World War I was an attempt to remind the world of the need after that terrible war. And now we find out epidemic and as well at the same time that ended to hopefully live in peace after such a terrible time. Hopefully that'll help us remember that desire going forward as well. So Don, I will wrap this up. I thank you again so much. And folks, thank you for joining us today. We so appreciate this new format. Join us next week, same time, same Zoom link, when we talk with John McClive. John will speak about his experience at Buffalo Forge, birthplace of air conditioning. A list of future speakers for 2020 can be found at buffaloah.com and Imagine Lifelong Learning, as well as the library. I'm Dennis Galucki. Have good health and a good day.
Thank you, Dennis.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome.